So tonight's presentation is giving your child a voice, a student-led IEP and student-led IEPs. My name, again, is Nicole Shaddix Ramos. I'm one of the program managers here at Parents Helping Parents. I am also an IEP learner. I received special education services when I was in school throughout my school life. In middle school and high school and elementary school. So I am a IEP learner. I actually have dyslexia. So sometimes you hear me talk fast or I might mispronounce a word. I do try my best to talk slower, but if I am talking too fast for you guys, please just note it in the chat box. You're not going to hurt my feelings. It's an area of improvement that I'm always working on. I am also a parent of a child that is an IEP learner and was receiving special education services through her entire school life as well. She has some mental health and some learning disabilities, and she became a very strong self-advocate. So students being involved in the IEP is a real passion of mine. I really think that they are instrumental in their future. And what does that future look like? And if they're not part of that plan, how does that happen? So this is near and dear to my heart. So I really like the tips portion of it at the end. Tonight, my co-presenter is Mary Diane. She's somebody on my team, and she's going to do a quick introduction.
Hello, good evening. Thank you for joining us in our training tonight. My name is Mary Diane. I'm one of the education research specialists here at Parents Helping Parents. And I also care for a family member who has special needs. And I have more experience with the early school age IEP. So thank you for being here.
Mary Diane. So yeah, so my daughter's now 25 and moved on to adulthood. And so we're past that IEP stage, but it doesn't, but she still has a disability. It will continue through the rest of her life. And she still needs to understand the supports as adulthood. And a big part of that is understanding self-advocacy, self-determination, and being part of those services and those programs that actually support you along the way. So that is why we really think it's important to talk about student-led IEPs. So our objective tonight is really to help parents understand the difference between self-determination and what does that mean? What being a self-advocate for your child mean, or what your being a self-advocate that you're and growing your child's skills in that area, what does that look like, and how can they actively participate not only in the IEP meeting, but at some point lead their own IEP meetings. So we hope that you learn some tips, maybe develop a plan, have an action item to do after this meeting, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. So we use a word in special education world or in the disability world, we really use the word self-determination a lot. But what truly does self-determination mean? So can you guys put in the chat or the questions and answers? What do you think self-determination means in 2 words or 3 words? What do you feel self-determination is? Okay, I'm not seeing a lot of what self-determination is, but that is perfect. I'm going to play this little video. I think this video clearly, oh, persistence, very good. I like that. Persistence is very good. So when we think about, oh, making decisions for yourself, great, great. That's a good one. So this quick little video clearly lays out what is self-determination, the theory of self-determination. It's a couple-minute video, and then we're going to have a little bit of a discussion about it.
Our 3 basic needs are autonomy, competence, and relatedness. We've heard some things about them today, but I'm just going to briefly say what they are. For us, relatedness is feeling cared for and connected to others. It has to do with a sense of belonging, a feeling that you matter to the other people that are there. And relatedness is enhanced not just by people treating you warmly and including you, but it's also enhanced by your giving to them and you're being able to matter in their lives. That's part of what helps us feel connected. So it's not a one-way street in relatedness. It has to do with both. And again, we'll show evidence to that effect. Competence is really commonly studied in psychology. Most theories of psychology would probably agree with us on this one point, which is competence is essential to wellness, to feel effective in your environment, to have some sense of mastery of the things that are important to you. Very, very important, and environments can have a big impact on that experience. And then finally, finally autonomy, which has been probably the most controversial, but also the most central of our psychological needs in the sense of research and our integrative mission, so to speak. Autonomy refers to behavior that is self-endorsed, that you agree with and find congruent within yourself. And so autonomy here means that you feel choiceful, self-initiating, and when you're fully autonomous, you're wholeheartedly behind the thing that you're doing. And again, because of that wholeheartedness, that's why performance tends to be better when you're acting out of autonomous motives.
So when you hear the theory of self-determination, let's really break it down. It's an idea that people can choose and set their own goals, right? So a lot of times children with disabilities or adults with disabilities get that autonomy taken away from them, or there's very well-meaningful people making those decisions. But when we're looking at what does it mean as a whole, we really want to encourage our children to become involved in their life decision making, to reach these goals. So think about talking about it as an action in your life to get what you want and when you need it. So for example, if somebody says to you, if you do this, I'll give you $100. Even if you decide to do that, you are not the person who took the steps to set up the action plan. You haven't identified your goal and your need. Somebody is telling you to do it, and it would be nice to have $100, so you're going to do it. Self-determination is when you set things up that you want. This is especially that when we're talking about that transition, especially into adulthood. It is a very important time in a child's life, and we don't want to wait until they've reached adulthood to start talking about these skills. So it's really important to understand that self-determination really contributes to that positive results in their adult life. And while we are building those skills, it is beneficial to their education. But it also, like we said, that adult life. And what does that adult life look like? It's their being in the community. They're living in the community. They're navigating that community. They're looking for meaningful employment, not just something to do, but meaningful, something meaning for them. Also, what does it look like in furthering their education, not just in high school, but after high school? What does that look like for them? So it's really important that those self-determination skills, by setting up a goal, understanding what you need, and making a plan for it, really improves the quality of the life of a person with a disability, or a child with a disability, or a preteen with a disability. I'm sure many of you here tonight have a teenager or a preteen that are trying to work on these skills, or you're here to learn more about those skills. So, Mary Diane, take it away.
So, what is self-advocacy? Are self-determination and advocacy the same thing? We might have heard self-determination and self-advocacy used interchangeably. However, they are different ideas. Self-advocacy involves speaking up for oneself and one's wants, needs, and interests. Self-determination describes the ability to make decisions for oneself. Self-advocacy and self-determination are important. Nicole, would you like to continue real quick?
Mary Diane has a little bit of a hoarse throat today, so I will probably be considering doing the rest of the presentation. I'm sorry about that. So self-advocacy is really, again, understanding one's wants and desires, where self-advocacy is the speaking up of those wants, right? So there are 3 steps in understanding self-determination and self-advocacy, and how important it is for us to understand how we can foster and support those. So the 3 processes of self-determination and self-advocacy and how they kind of intertwine with each other is, at the simplest level, understanding your needs. That is self-determination. Knowing what kind of support you might need or what kind of help you may need, that is self-determination. Communicating those needs and those wants and those desires is self-advocacy. So students often learn self-advocacy in small steps. They may start with understanding one of their challenges. Maybe they're able to say, I don't feel that's right for me, or I don't like that. Maybe they are saying, I know what kind of help I may need. So student-led IEPs is one of those ways to start fostering both of those skills. So I have a question for you all. When do you think children first start practicing self-determination and self-advocacy? Can anybody put in the chat what age they think that is? 2. 2. So 2 is a pretty common age right here. So what we really want to think about is self-advocacy starts from the moment they are born. And how does that high school? Somebody said high school, but self-advocacy develops as they grow. Those skills are different as they get older. But from the moment they're born, they have a desire within themselves to survive, right? So they know they want to eat. They know they may need to be changed. They know they may need to be held. And so they know that instinctively, that comes from within them, of something that they need. So they have determined that's a need, right? Instinctively. But then, um, what do they do to self-advocate? They cry. They may not have the voice, but that is their mode of communication to us at that time, right? When they are enjoying something, they smile, they giggle, they laugh. So they have always been able to show self-advocacy. Now, self-advocacy and self-determination have to grow. Of course they have to grow. It changes as they get older. And when we're little babies, like we said, when somebody is playing with a toy and they don't want to share it because it's their favorite toy, somebody said, those are all self-advocacy and self-determination skills. So they've always had it. Now, that instinctual self-advocacy and self-determination may go away. And so it becomes more important to start developing those skills for where they are at and what they need, right? So that is where that comes into practice, where as we're little and we're younger, it's really out of the means of survival, but it is still those skills. But as we get older, those skills may be harder to refine or explain, right? So that's why we need to have some supports and goals on how to do this. And we're going to go into that a little bit more further along. But Mary Diane's going to talk a little bit about the next slide.
Hi, sorry.
Oh, okay. I guess she thought of me. So let's watch a little video about self-determination and self-advocacy. This video kind of teaches students the term, or students themselves explaining what they believe self-advocacy is.
We're here to talk about your future. Have you thought about your career? Where and how you will live? Will you be active in your community? It's exciting to think about your future, but it's important for you to be a part of making your plans. This is what self-determination is all about. What is self-determination? Self-determination is making your own choices and standing up for your rights. Other people would make decisions for you without your self-determination. Determine your own life directions and make choices. You get to speak up for your rights. Being supportive of yourself. Determining happiness, health, future, not just as the others want it, but as you want it. Imagine these two scenarios. One student learns about her disability, understands the kind of accommodation she needs, has a solid grasp of their own goals, and attends to all of their IEP team meetings, always willing to share his and her opinions with the IEP team. Another student knows very little about his and her disability and how she and others can address it, knows a few goals and rarely attends their IEP team meetings. In short, other controls all aspects of addressing his and her needs. Which of these students do you think will have a successful transition to adulthood? There may be times when you need more help. That's why self-advocacy is so important. Self-advocacy can mean sharing your plans and information with others to get help. By others, that can mean post-secondary schools, career certification program, or agency that can help you improve your life skills and how to manage your daily living. These are just a few. Talk with your IEP team, school counselors, or teachers to get more info that can help you with your specific needs. So you need to start participating and planning for your future. You are the best advocate in determining everything about your own life.
So, sorry, videos on Zoom or when you're doing a Zoom presentation don't always like to stop right away. So, what is a student-led IEP? So, basically, just like everything else in special education, student-led IEPs are led by the student. They are student-driven. They are what the student needs to participate. So the I in IEP stands for individual. The I in ITP, individual transition plan, stands for it. So when we want to think about it, they are the I. They are that individual. So traditionally, the IEP development requires the students' team, such as the parents, the mandated people that are part of the team, the school representatives, the teachers, the service providers, to be part of development of this IEP. And we're all a group of well-intended adults really wanting to understand and appropriately meeting our children's needs. We create this plan of learning for our children because we are the team. While the process can check off those boxes that we need to check off of who has to be at an IEP meeting, there is always or often something very essential missing from that equation. And does anybody know what that is? So it's the student, right? The student is usually the essential portion missing of it. So when we think about the student-led special education plan, it allows the child to take a meaningful role in their special education processes, right? There's many different processes. So not only the planning of their IEP, but understanding their needs, understanding their strengths, understanding what services they need. So students who actively participate through the IEP or their transition planning are more likely to be engaged in this process and want to achieve those goals because they were part of making those goals. We can have the gold star IEP. We as parents can think we got all the services this child needs. We think this is going to make them a successful adult. but we didn't always have the buy-in of our students. And without that buy-in, how many of you times have you heard your child say, I don't want to go to speech and language. Oh, I don't want to go to that special class, right? I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that, right? And we know that it's what they need to succeed in school, but they weren't part of it. Their input wasn't part of it. So we want to get them engaged. We want them to get excited that special education is a support or a program. That's why at the beginning, if you remember, I said IEP learners. It takes that stigma away from them that they are in special education. It's not embarrassing to be in special education, but some children may feel uncomfortable with that word. Maybe they are learning how to accept their disability or talk to others about their disability. So saying you're an IEP learning, meaning you need an individual plan to learn. And so when they're part of that process, it really, really gets them engaged. So while student-led IEPs, the student really holds that leadership role in the meeting. They are not just there to be the person that needs to be there or the mandated person that needs to be there. They really are participation in the development, the writing of that IEP, and the implementation. And I know that we all have children with different ability levels and different areas of strengths, but we will go into how children of all different types of disabilities or different abilities may participate and how that looks like. While the concept of the student-led IEP is not well known, there are many school districts currently practicing student-led IEPs here in California. So we do know that there are school districts are doing it, and we do know that some school districts aren't doing it. But the concept of student IEPs have actually been around a long time. In the formation of IDEA, when they made the mandate of special education and the things that had to be followed, the students were written into that as participants, and especially when they were talking about transition. So this goal of them being participants, or this idea of them being participants, is not new. Is it being put into practice? While some school districts are doing it, some school districts aren't, right? And we're going to talk about, if your school district isn't, how do we start that process? So when we think about the student being involved in their IEP and being implemented, it's kind of obvious that they are the cornerstone of this. And why aren't we doing it? So we want to think about, why aren't we doing it? Is it because we feel that we need to support them a little bit more? Maybe we're thinking about their ability level. So we can start, like I said at the beginning, small steps. Maybe it's just understanding one or two goals. Maybe it's understanding one accommodations, and getting through understanding these little components that will lead them to it will lead them to a greater sense of control in this process, right? They don't have to know the entire process altogether. I'm sure many of you here tonight have taken a long time and been involved in many IEPs and are still learning to process it. But chunking it up might help them take control of that process. So somebody asked if we would be recording the meeting, and yes, we will be recording the meeting and sending it out to people. But also, somebody also mentioned we may be in fear that the children may say something wrong. And we're going to talk about that. That's actually a tip I have as a parent. I worried about that when my child was self-advocacy, but it's still there. It is still there, how they learn, right? How do they may not say something right, but it doesn't mean that everybody in that team understands as a student, right? So it's going to take a little bit more less impact if somebody says something wrong and not be that. But there are ways we can involve them and practice them in.
So the idea of student-led IEPs is much more than just participating in that process. It is about the whole range of activities that a young person is involved in becoming a successful adult. Leading their IEP is just one of these activities, but it is an important part of taking control of their future. This is a pretty clear definition that leads to the idea of a student taking responsibility for themselves. Actively participating in their IEP thus becomes an important part of that responsibility. If we think about it, it becomes clear that our students with disabilities have less control over their lives than typical children. It may be behaviors that get in the way, just the fact that, or not being able to access their education efficiently, or just the fact that they have to go to places and do things that typical students don't have to go and do. Think about having to go to a special education classroom, to have adults working with them more closely than with other children, and this comes into focus. Thus, it becomes even more important for our children to reclaim some of that control. So when we think about the self-determination theory and student-led IEPs, let's reflect on the phrase, nothing about us without us. This phrase has been used in many different circumstances, but has kind of become a mantra for the disability rights movement. People with disabilities are a recognized minority in our country and have to fight for rights that have been denied them for too long. And these words hold a vision that represents pride and power and calls for inclusion in decisions that shape their lives and environments, or meaningful inclusion. A student with disabilities can benefit from recognizing their membership in a unique group of individuals with rights and needs that can be addressed correctively. So there has been a lot of research into the concept of student-led IEPs. We will discuss one tonight due to time constraints. However, there are no studies that we could locate that found that having students participate actively and genuinely in their IEPs led to negative outcomes. Overwhelming evidence indicates that the more involved a student is, the better. That's what the goal of education ultimately is, to help students become independent, successful adults. The unemployment rate is very high, with variables depending on the disability type. However, across all disability categories, the rate of unemployment for students that actively participated in their IEP process is significantly lower than their peers who did not actively participate. Research shows that the students with disabilities who left school more self-determined were more than twice as likely as their peers to be employed 1 year after graduation, and they earned significantly more. All right, and Nicole will continue with some more case study.
Studies. I want to point out, somebody in the comments said, sometimes maybe the fear of us letting our children be part of the IEP is a possibility of what we want versus what our kids want, right? And our kids' frontal lobes, even in typical developing children, are not developed as teenagers. We know that. And if we have a disability that may impact the development as well, it may be, you know, they have maybe off the wall ideas of what their life is going to be. I will say, I don't believe in any ambitious or anything too high. If I think in this process of self-determination, if somebody wants to be an astronaut, they may not be an astronaut, but digging into what about astronauts does that student like, right? Maybe it is the study of the stars or looking at the stars. Maybe somebody wants to be a professional dancer and they may not be a professional dancer, but they may want to work and teach children, right? So really looking at their needs and their strengths is really going to help develop what that is. So they don't, I know it's to us, it's what we want versus what they want, but they can be combined, right? We can come to a middle ground. Sometimes it just takes us supporting them to really to kind of nurture what they want. That's what they think they may want because they know I like stars and the stars are part of astronauts. I like to dance, so I want to be a professional dancer. But there's so many different components to what they like. So trying to delve into those skills and they're really what they want can help us form this um, very um, plan, trying to think of the word and it's not coming out, a very cohesive plan that really is understanding based on their needs, but also some with some direction from us. So it doesn't mean that when they start out self-advocating and when they start showing self-determination, do we step away and we be like, oh, we're out of the picture, right? No, we are still guiding them. We are just lifting them up to have a more powerful voice in their life. It's not us being taken away from the situation. It is kind of us like narrowing it down, but helping them. I likened it to when my daughter was in school, her elementary school years, her middle school years, I was really, really driving the car. I was driving those services. I was driving and advocating for her needs, right? And then when she got into high school, at some point, I I was still there with her. She was still a student driver. She was driving the vehicle and having some self-determination skills. And she was also having some, advocacy skills. But I still had a steering wheel as a passenger, right? I still was helping direct it a little bit in case she got off course. I didn't want her to get hurt. So I was still driving it a little bit. But then at some point, I had to let go of that will, and she was driving the car. And then as she got older, my involvement in her life, I started becoming a backseat driver, right? She was really starting to take charge of that. And I was still there in the car supporting her and encouraging her and saying, oh, that's a red light, remember, right? I was still a backseat driver. But at some point, our goal is always for our children to have some sense of independence. And we then are no longer in the car and we are driving alongside of them in their on our own car. And so we want to give them the tools to really be able to be safe and happy and enjoy driving, right? So our involvement is not just immediately going away, it is just building their skills while still supporting them. So we are quickly going to go over this one case study because I think it's really helpful to understand what the science is about self-determination and student-led IEPs. So there was an article published by Christina Matson from the Center of Educational Improvement, and she did one study that included researchers and teachers, and they participated in the case study of actually implementing a student-led IEP. So at one of the high school members were interviewed about student-led IEPs. There was the people that were involved in this reported that the meetings were more relaxed. There wasn't a lot of defensiveness going on. It was actually a more positive atmosphere for all involved because the child was really taking a leadership role. The team as a whole were focused more on the growth and the accomplish wells as understanding their needs, but they were really focused on how that growth was happening and really what are the accomplishments that are happening. But we also talked about where do they need the level of supports. Parents tended to contribute more in meetings when their students were there. IEP were more effective rather than teacher directed. So it was more of a team directive than just one person talking at the IEP. The general education teachers reported that they were gaining a different perspective on the students, and students that they thought were passive and quiet in a classroom setting, they now had a different aspect on it. They knew that they had some great leadership skills. One of the administrators of that study even said, and I'm going to read this because I think it's important to read a quote, but they quoted to say, oftentimes parents of students with disabilities have had to struggle with their students about school. But with the student-led IEP, parents are proud of and confident and the growth exhibited in the change of their students, right? So even administrators were remarking how well these meetings were more collaborative. One teacher even stated in the IEP that, in my opinion, the student demonstrated a level of confidence and ability during the IEP meeting that they have not ever seen in class. They attributed it to the social concerns that were not working during the conferences, right? So they attributed what the social concerns in the classroom would might have been to what was not working inside the actual IEP meeting. As a result, I changed my opinion about the placement of this student in the classroom. Before the IEP meeting, I doubted whether he was going to make progress. The IEP meeting led by him convinced me that he had made great strides than I had ever thought possible. In a short, everyone left smiling, and the teacher even summarized that even when tough issues were discussed, there was no animosity around everybody, and nobody felt left out. So to conclude this study, research really showed that what we typically know and hear about student-led IEPs don't always match, right? That the teachers were saying that they didn't think that this was going to work, that they didn't understand that they were going to be participants, but the reality is they work a lot better than everybody suspected. So if the IEP is developed without the students learn that their voices really don't matter, that their decisions are not theirs and are made for them instead of what they want. Sometimes when they feel like your voice is not being heard or your decisions are not being respected, many of the time it can lead to self-sabotage, or it can also lead to self-deprecation, right? Like them not liking themselves. Like I'm telling people what I want, but they're not listening to me, right? So making sure them actively involved kind of takes those worries away from there. You know, there's always a disconnect between the idea of real participation and lip service. And so we want to make sure that when we talk about participation, it's truly active participation in that process. Just having the child come in to the meeting and listen, introducing themselves is acceptable at first, maybe in first grade or second grade, maybe in middle school, that is accessible. But as they get older and as they become more self-aware, these needs change. They need to really be active in participating in that planning, even at the IEP meeting itself. So either non-participation or just being there to fill a seat leads to a greater risk of them losing control. And it's actually very counterproductive of the results that you would like at a student-led IEP meeting or a student involvement IEP. Students with disability want to control their environment just like any of us. And having less control always doesn't have the outcome that we all expect. And those are when we are having children avoiding school or not wanting to go to class or really struggling in their place in their high school setting or middle school setting. So really, what does participation look like? And it may look different for everybody. So I'm going to go into what it looks like and how it looks like when we get a little bit older. But let's first consider this. Is it appropriate for a child that is in their first IEP? Let's say kindergarten, not their first IEP. I mean, it could be their first IEP, 3 years old, but say it's their first meeting, kindergarten. Could they participate in that meeting? Well, they can. And I'm going to explain a little bit of why that means. So, when they're at that meeting with their little 5-year-old face and maybe they're missing teeth and looking all cute, or maybe they're all red from just coming out from recess, they're coming into the classroom with adults, and it's the focus of on them. We all remember why we are there. We're there for this child. We're there for our student. So it kind of puts everybody at ease at the beginning of the meeting. If you want your child to participate in any level, at the different grade levels, in kindergarten, how that may look for one person may not look for the different person. But I used to say to the teachers that, oh, my daughter, I'm going to use a different name because it is her own life now. My daughter Sally, she'll be participating in the meeting. She'll be there for the first 10 or 15 minutes. And how the structure of that first 10 or 15 minutes is going to go is, first of all, you guys are going to introduce yourself and the role you play in her life. I'm not talking about the title, but the role. How do you support her? The next things we're going to ask her is, I'm going to ask her 3 to 4 questions, and these are the questions. Nobody else is going to ask her them. I'm going to ask them. And then I'm going to ask her if she wants to go or if she wants to continue. And so then, as a little 5-year-old, she came in and she introduced themselves, and the principal said something like, oh, I'm the school principal, and how I help you is I make sure that your teachers are doing what they're supposed to be doing. I'm your teacher's boss. And then the teachers would be like, you know me, I'm your teacher, I see you every day. I help you with your learning. And maybe one of her service coordinators said, oh, I help you, you come into my classroom and we do speech, right? So that everybody talked about the role they play, not their titles. To a 5-year-old, titles don't matter. And then I introduced myself and I say, you know me, I'm mommy, and I help you through at home, and I love you and I appreciate you and I think you're a wonderful girl. So I want you to tell everybody in this room, what is your favorite thing about school? She would say something like, I love recess. What do you love about recess? I get a boss around everybody. Everybody follows me around. I'm the boss. And then I said, what don't you like about school? And she says, I don't like reading. Well, why don't you like reading? I don't understand it. It's confusing. It makes me upset. I start to cry when I have to. And then I say, okay, what could everybody in this room do to help you at school so you're not so afraid of reading or something else that may be happening? She goes, I really don't want to read in front of everybody, right? And then I say, oh, thank you. That was really helpful, Sally. Do you want to stay for the rest of the meeting? We're going to be talking about a lot of stuff around how to support you, or do you want to go out to recess now? And she'd be like, I want to go out to recess, right? So we framed it, and she was in there for 10 or 15 minutes. And then what happened is, when she left, we found 3 very important things about her. We understand that she's very social. So I know that she doesn't have trouble making friends, but I also know that she's a little bossy, right? And is that social appropriateness? So maybe we have to, even though she's able to make friends, was she socially appropriate? Can she interact with other students without bossing them around? Because she thinks everybody listens to her. I doubt everybody in her class wants to be bossed around by Sally. We also learned that she was struggling with reading. So we need to address how to support her in reading, and some accommodations, meaning like she wasn't going to be called in reading in class, right? So we learned a lot about her in 3 questions. And then we looked at those assessment reports and we developed an IEP for her. But she was the component of it. And she went to every single IEP meeting that we ever had. And her her involvement kept growing and growing and growing. And so a lot of times we think about it at that age, but as a student starts to go into meetings, we can start it off with those few minutes. Maybe we're just doing introductions. Maybe we're talking about what we like about school. Maybe we're talking about what they don't like about school. And then as time goes on and your children's abilities change, the student may increase their participation, right? Eventually, students may be able to write their own goals, hopefully by 12th grade, or help in developing of those goals. Students can even participate in a much bigger degree as they get older and as we learning those skills. And we can develop goals in the IEP to start learning these skills in kindergarten. So we never want to underestimate what our child's ability is or they could um, achieve. So some ideas of having your child participate in it can be very simple or can be very complex. So we may look at the different kinds of responsibilities that they take. Maybe it's help that they're sitting with the teacher, helping them write the invitation or preparing the invitation for their IEP meeting or their meeting notice, right? Maybe the teacher is explaining who these people are and why they need to be there. Maybe they start conducting the introductions. Maybe they start the introductions and ask everybody to introduce themselves. Maybe we help them write a script for that. Maybe they make a presentation of what their strengths are and what they need help with. Maybe they are starting to able to communicate their strengths, their weaknesses, and their interests. Maybe if they're nonverbal, they're using other methods that they use to communicate. Maybe if your child has anxiety, they're drawing or you're tape recording it at home and having them participate. Maybe they start asking and requesting accommodations at these meetings. Maybe they help define the goals and their dreams and how does that look like for them. Maybe they even help write a section of the IEP or help develop a section of the IEP. And at some point, they may facilitate the entire IEP meeting themselves. So the main thing is to involve the students early. And if you haven't, you can start at any time, right? But we want them to be at the greatest extent possible, but what is comfortable for you as a parent and what is comfortable for them as a student. We do not want to push them beyond their comfort measure. We just want to inch that way up. The more earlier they become, the more successful they are and they understand this process. And the next IEP meeting, they're going to be a little bit more confident. They're going to become a little bit more independent. And it will obviously to lead to a more successful adult life. So maybe most importantly, and not directly related to the actual IEP, but just understanding components of their IEP and why it is important and how to monitor it and how to speak up when things in their IEPs are not being implemented. So I think this is we're going to take a look. I know we have a lot of videos, but I think videos are 1,000 words, right? It's a very quick information that's a very visual to see. So we're going to take a look at this short video. It kind of describes the process of an actual case study of a child participating in their IEP. This is done through a different district and a different thing, but it's really an example of a student who goes to University Park campus and how they, and that school district, they really practice student-led IEPs or student conferences is what they may call it. But you're really going to see the growth and the empowerment of the students through this process.
When I get in arguments with my peers, it's really hard for me to like say I'm wrong or apologize. That's why I was wondering if you guys have any tips.
Because our students participate in student-led meetings, they have a sense of agency in their own life. They gain the skills to make good decisions in school and outside of school.
So I think I need to improve in this area.
So often in anything that you do in education, in life, students always feel like, oh, Adults are always saying their opinion. I don't have a voice. I never have any say. So part of what we do with the student-led meetings is they get a chance to say what their concerns are, how they see things.
Welcome, everyone.
Alec led his own meeting today. And we bring in all teachers, me, parents, to say, here are some strengths of mine, and here are some challenges that I need help with.
I'm very happy that they decided to have everybody in the same room because it allows all of us to get all on the same page. Like my schoolwork and tests and stuff, it's pretty good, but when it comes to homework, it's really bad. Homework really hurt my grades this quarter, so that's something I really need to improve. The second I get home, I don't feel like doing anything else involving school. So
They're not making up what's going to happen in this meeting on the spot, right? That's intimidating. Instead, he's got this structured document with things he's proud of, things he needs to work on, specific steps that he's going to take.
So they come up with their steps and their goals and what they want to work on and what they may need support with.
for me, it's actually being able to sit down and get it done, because once I sit down and get it done, it's gonna get done. Getting started is the hardest part for me. So I can stay after and do my homework before I go home.
From mom and dad, when a student stays with me, I write a note and I say, Alex stayed today until 3:30. He did a great job working on his POW. So that way there's good communication back and forth.
I think it's about him having to set goals for himself and for us to give him the best tools to work with so that he can accomplish those goals.
And then you be able to see yourself in a new light, which only gives you more of that confidence. The fact that he has, 8 or 9, 10 adults for these meetings to actually get on the same page and say, look, we recognize you're here, we see where you've come from, and we want you to tell us where you want to go. And just having that collaboration it's wonderful.
Yeah.
Right?
I just wanted to thank Mr. St. Louis real quick, and all of you for being such good teachers. I think I improved more because I got a personal relationship with all of you.
As students get a little older, and especially in their junior year, we have these meetings called PEP meetings, which is Planning for Educational Progress.
So Jocelyn's meeting is different. She too will lead hers, but hers is more focused on her future.
I went to Holy Cross. I've been around Clark a lot, but those are the only two colleges I've really seen, I guess.
During junior PEPs, we like to find out what their future college ideas, goals, aspirations are.
The medical field is very fascinating for me, but I haven't really gotten more in depth with it. This meeting was basically to evaluate where I should be looking for colleges and to see what are my strengths and what I need to work on more.
A lot of our students are the first generation to go to college, so they don't have any experience in the process, and sometimes because they don't, they think that it's out of reach. It's really an opportunity for them to get that support from us.
I wrote my college essay actually around this idea that I had of perhaps being a physical therapist. I know, you look at me now. And then I got to college and I saw, oh, it's like all science classes all the time, which I hadn't really realized that. So do you find yourself interested in the sciences like that, like taking that amount on?
I know that science is not that of my highest strengths, but if I apply myself, I think I can.
Student-led meetings allow our students to feel like they have a chance to talk to staff on another level as humans with a life and an experience that can be shared.
My meeting helped me understand that you don't really need to know your passion right away, but it's really good to have an idea of what kind of college is right for me.
At the center of any meeting like this, especially since the students are leading them, is just a baseline of real respect. You're in the driver's seat. It's your life. Love yourself, respect yourself. We're here to help.
Be patient with yourself, and as you said in the last line, take it a day at a time, right?
So, I think we're going to talk a little now about what maybe school district concerns or teachers' concerns are, and some questions that may arise when we start talking about student-led IEPs to staff if they're not already implementing it in your school. Mary Diane, did you want to talk a little bit about this?
Sure. So, does this video inspire you to talk to your school about student-led IEPs? Do you know if your school district has student-led IEP meetings? Teacher and administrative staff may have questions on how to process works and have concerns about obstacles that they may get in the way. It's important to know what some questions and objections could be and how to address concerns from your IEP team that might bring up. So let's look at some closely. So here's a sample question. Yeah.
So here's a sample question. So the question is that you may hear from administrative staff that says, what about the lack of time we have at school? So a possible answer to that question is how to teach the student about student-led IEPs and what about that lack of time. So the question is, teaching them about student-led IEPs is not going to be, not time consuming. It will take up some time. And how do we address that in the IEP? How do we get around that? So that may be a concern from some of the administrative staff. And so we want to think about priorities. We want to remind the team about how critical this is. We saw the case studies. We really talked about what those students wrong. We've seen those videos, right? So we really want to answer that type of question is, well, what is the priorities? A place to start maybe that we can offer to the team of how we may implement this is, because we always don't want to just ask for something and not have some kind of follow-up or some kind of starting point. So maybe we can start off by saying, let's take a few or 4 or 5 5 class periods or session to teach every student how to lead their own IEPs. So it could take only 4 or 5 sessions. It doesn't have to be 4 or 5 days in a row. It could be weekly. It could be services, right? So these sections will really help a service of teaching them understand the concept of what an IEP is. As the student gets um, more experience, the time is going to be less. So there may be some time upfronting about understanding the different components of it and how they want to participate in that. Maybe there is a study skills class that they can do this in. Maybe there is some time with a resource specialist to learn how to do this. So we can always look at what services there are getting and formulate some goals around that so we're not interrupting their services or their class time. In the answer, we are referring to direct instruction time that you need for your student to participate, right? So that's what I talked about. Maybe embedding in some other services or developing goals so they can have around services around this. Remember, special education, the goal of special education is always to gain meaningful employment, to further your education and live independently. So it doesn't matter when you started reading your getting services for an IEP, those are from the time there, if they get it when they're 3, if they get it when they're 10, if they give it when they're in high school, they are start special education services. The goal is always for those 3 components, right? So we want them to benefit from their education because that helps grow those skills. So you and your IE team will need to agree on the instructional time. What does that instruction look like? Who will provide it? In addition, they'll need to talk about the time to be set aside to address issues like what goals they want to work on, what accommodations they want to work on, what modifications they may need. The bigger question is, what will they want their IEP to lead to after high school? What does the current plan look like for when they leave high school? They may also need to consider time to actively reflect on their successes or areas that they weren't able to complete from last year, right? So in this process, it started early in the child's education life, then the steps become less frequent. They gain those skills. But just like any service in the IEP, this leads to some kind of independence and can be addressed and can be part of their services. And as a team, you guys are going to decide how that looks.
So a possible answer to the question, what about the time it takes away from academic instruction to teach the student how to lead their IEPs? Many of the skills needed for student-led IEPs are related to standards and the general education curriculum goals may be need. Self-determination skills lead to successful life outcomes. We should make time to teach and support them. As we mentioned, before the positive outcomes of our students, active participation in the IEP process makes time spent on this one of the most important activities that we can provide. The results argue for taking adequate time to prepare for, fully participate in, and implement the IEP. It is time very well spent.
I think it's always time well spent when you're fostering independence, right? So another possible answer to the question, many of my students lack the motivation towards learning. How do we get them to participate? Well, we know research showed that students all that are involved in transition-related services or development of their IEP, they will provided with ongoing opportunities to participate and plan and express their concerns, their desires, and they want, and actively pursue their own goals, will elevate their progress and adjust their activities accordingly. So we want to encourage your school or your IEP team to look at the research. As educator practices, they are always looking for evidence-based practices or research-based practices. So if you're interested in that, we can always send you that information and those resources that you can bring to your team to show them how them being involved actually makes them more motivated than we once saw. We saw in that study that they were even like, oh, this was a kid that I thought did not have motivation and had so much motivation when he was part of that developing of that plan.
A possible answer to the question, what about student disability levels? We will have to make creative adaptations. Students can communicate in some way, either in writing, with pictures, with assistive technology, or with signs or gestures. So they can lead the IEP meeting in these same ways. Our students generally have much greater capabilities than most outside observers might think. Looking back at the case study that was conducted at the high school, we saw that both administration and the general education teacher were surprised at how competent their students were, more so than they thought. Communication difficulties should not stop participation. They need to be accommodated for. By coming up with creative ways to allow students to participate, we are not only solving a current problem, but providing valuable information that can help a student better communicate in all life circumstances.
I really want to put this to the attention of creative ways to have your child participate. Our children all have different abilities. They all have areas of strength that they like. My daughter, like I said, she loved to dance. She liked to be bossy too. So she never had a problem leading an IEP meeting, but she really did like to dance. And one year she just really had trouble communicating. She had some anxiety. And so what she did is she made a video, and it was a speaking video of her speaking. And then she did an overlay and in the background of her dancing an interpreted dance of what she thought that felt like, right? And it was really impactful for them. They really saw some of her passion and her thing, but they were able to listen to what that was. So they don't always have to speak at the meeting. There's very different ways that they can communicate. Some children draw. Some children are really good at making PowerPoints, right? Some children need assistive technology to communicate, like communication devices. So we are looking at their ability, but trying to fix their strengths and how they participate. There is no one right way for a student to participate. It is their comfort level. What is going to make them comfortable? And we want to ask them that, right? We want to see what makes you comfortable. How do you want to participate? Brainstorm with them before you even go to the IEP team and talk about it. So another questions that administrative staff may have or teachers may have is, we're concerned about the IEP meeting itself. How will it go? Like, will we go off script? Will these children go on a tangent? Will they say something that shouldn't be said? So the meetings will not be as scripted as past meetings, right? You're not going to follow that same type of, oh, what are their present levels and what is this and what is that? We're really trying to formulate these student-led IEP meetings on the needs of each individual child. So we can't be sure that the students will actually say at the meeting, we don't know. They're not going to be scripted. We can have guiding points like that video showed with like a little outline of what they're going to say, but children are unpredictable, especially teenagers and middle schoolers, right? Some of the things that come out of their mouths sometimes are jaw dropping. Some of the things that they say can be funny, right? So so this is going to be the dynamic of it. It's going to get some taking used to, but the risk of them participating and making a mistake or saying something wrong really outweighs the benefit, right? The benefit is so much more than the risk of them saying something that may be wrong. The students may even really surprise you. Their perspective on the world and the perspective of their life can be polished. It could be a very good communication. They're going to surprise you. I will say, I don't know how many times my child has surprised me in a good way and a way that I never even thought was going to happen, right? So it's a good thing to lose control as a parent. It's okay to lose a little bit of that control at the meeting because we don't always as a parent have to get our way, but we're giving the driving seat to the student. We're allowing them to be more self-reliant, building those self-determination skills, taking back some of the control so eventually they can be independent, right? And so yes, we have to let go of control a little bit, but they're taking it, right? That control is just not going anywhere. It's not floating around in the room and everybody is lost. We are just transferring our control to our students. So I really encourage you to say, it's okay to take a chance. The more the student participates, the better that they're going to get at it, right? So just because the old ways of doing things were comfortable, you know how an IEP meeting goes by now, but doesn't make it the right way, right? Like I said at the beginning, it's well-meaningful adults making decisions about the future of a child that may not be their passions and their wants and their goals. It is your wants versus their wants. So I'm going to quickly go over some of these benefits and skills that we look at. So when we promote active involvement in an educational planning decision, this can be, California always requires it at the age of 16 that they be involved in their IEP. It can be done sooner, but when we start them in promoting them active involvement, they are actually practicing life skill goals. They are problem solving. They're learning how to effectively communicate. They're in their own way, right? However they may communicate. They are gaining listening skills. They're learning how to be assertive in their what they want. They're understanding these self-advocacy skills and these decision making. So the younger they are, the more they can be involved. I said kindergarten, right? So think about what that looks like for each individual child. We are also teaching them to direct their own learning. We know research shows that when children have say over autonomy, that they start learning strategies like self-instruction, self-monitoring, self-evaluation. They also learn about these academic skills and what do they need. So they also are looking at vocational and independent living. So when learning is self-directed, it promotes self-determination. We are also looking at communication at a with high expectations and emphasizing on that student uniqueness and strengths. And so one simple yet powerful activity that can promote this self-determination is having high expectations of the student and their ability to communicate their needs. Students with disability often are too aware of what they cannot do. We talk about it all the time. Other kids talk to about them what they cannot do. They are often not aware of their strengths and their unique abilities. So when we're starting to talk about self-determination and self-advocacy, we're promoting strengths-based communication. We're promoting strengths-based IEPs. So creating learning environments also actively involve problem solving. All of our classrooms are diverse. It doesn't matter if you're what kind of classroom you're in. It's a very diverse population, right? And so we want them to be involved in creating that safe place for themselves, understanding what are their services and what does that look like for them. We let them know it's okay to make mistakes and people are there to support you. And we all know mistakes lead to problem solving skills. So learning communication that is collaborative, understanding classroom roles, understanding classroom settings, understanding your education program is how they achieve that independence. And the benefits of self-advocacy and self-determination also create partnerships with parents, with students, and with other administrative staff that they may not be seeing that are just their teacher. When we focus on self-determination, it does not license the parent to be excused. We're not removing you from the equation. We never want to be removed from the equation. I will always be in my child's life, right? But we're giving them more autonomy. We're allowing them to promote self-determination. We're also helping collaborate what that looks like at school and what that looks like at home, and how important it is to all aspects of their life. What does it look like when they're at school? What does it look like when they're at home? What does it look like when they maybe further their education and go to a trade school, or maybe they go to a community college or a college, whatever that looks like, or when they gain a job or something they want or an interest in a hobby. Them having meaningful participation and learning these skills is really important. And one of the ways to do is through the student-led IEPs, because we really want to, like I said, the purpose of IEPs is to further your education, gain meaningful employment, and live independently. And what better way to do is when you're receiving those intensive services through the school district. So one component of it is student-led IEPs, but to implement student-led IEPs, it's a team effort. We need to figure out what services that we're going to do, what components we're going to look at, what goals are we going to look at it, so they can gain the skills to start their student-led IEPs. So Mary Diane, why don't you tell them a little bit about a good place to start?
Yes, so it's not too early to start. Why not kindergarten? You can find age-appropriate ways to have any age at any age for the child to participate in their IEP process as they get older. So this the why so the more important it is to participate, unless the gain in order to gain the skills to lead their own IEPs. Once they are ready for IEP portfolio, it is the perfect way to help the students organize their thoughts, script out the key components, and scaffold elements such as self-evaluation, reflection, and problem solving. We have a My IEP meeting template that was created by Becky Wilson, Baker at the University of Northern Iowa. This is a fillable template that can be used by students to help prepare them for guiding their own IEP meeting. You can also provide this presentation to your team or school, or have them give us a call and we provide them with more research and information links. There are a lot of organizations, research, and support that schools can access to help them implement a successful program. There may also be a teacher at your school who is already interested or has been doing this work. Your SELPA is also a good place to get support.
So what is one way that you tomorrow can start figuring out how your child can participate? So there is a couple ways, right? We can first, we can go to a teacher, go to our case manager and say, let's talk about how we can involve Johnny in our next IEP meeting. Now, we're not saying student-led IEPs, but how do we get him a little bit more involved? Let's come up with a plan, right? So that's one way to start it. Maybe you're full force into let's start student-led IEPs for my child. We'll start small. And that means maybe going to the district and saying, do you have a student-led IEPs? Do you do student-led IEPs? And if they say no, then you can say, well, how do we get that done? I want my student to start leading their own IEPs. And I know that's going to take a little bit of while to plan, but I would like to start it now, right? So those are two just ways of just participation and then actually starting the process. So you may be saying to yourself, I'm ready. I think this is great. I'm ready to give a little bit of control to my child. What are my next steps? So first, you need to get your child excited about this process. You need to get them to understand what their autonomy is and why it's good to self-determination and the benefits of helping be part of their IEP meeting. So, so that's the first process. Okay, as a parent, I know that might be easier said than done. When a teenager or a pre-teenager doesn't want to do something, it's very hard to do that. So you need to get them inside. We need to get their buy-in. We need them to want to do this. So the first step is you can go to our PHP calendar, and on Thursday, we have the same training but geared for students themselves. It is really, you are encouraged to attend with them, but it is really understanding their voice. So on Thursday, we have the webinar called Your Voice Matters. It's similar to tonight's title, but it's student-led IEPs for students. This training will provide them with information they need to start building the confidence of self-determination and self-advocacy. So we want to make sure that we do that. I think, Mary Diane, if you can find the link on our website and put that in the chat, that would probably be very helpful. Okay, so the hurdle is taken care of. You're trying to get your child, maybe they have the buy-in, maybe they're going to attend our training. Now we have to get the district's buy-in. So reach out to your IEP team, maybe reaching out to the special education director directly. Maybe you may reach out to your SELPA for more support. You can always contact us here at Parents Helping Parents, and we can give you some ideas of how to start this. Um, ask it ask it to be placed on the board agenda if if your school is not doing them. Of how do we implement student-led IEPs in this district? It is important that they understand why this is beneficial for students. There also may be teachers at your school who may be interested in this, who have heard about it. Maybe your district is interested, but they don't know where to start. So you can always give us a call here at Parents Helping Parents, or encourage them to call us, and we can give them some information of how to start that process. So it's just first asking, do we have one? And how do we get one if we don't, right? There's no harm in answering. The worst they can say no. And then if they say no, then you figure out how to have your child participate in the meeting. They have the right to participate in their meeting. So it may not be this formal process of a student at IEP meeting, but we can start building in their participation, right? So it doesn't have to be a formal thing, but it can be a less formal thing with them just participating and kind of guiding the meeting around their needs. So the key takeaways we hope you learned tonight is we want you to take a little minute to reflect on what you learned. If you would like to share your biggest takeaway, feel free to do it in the chat box. Mary Diane did put the for the students in the thing if you're interested in registering. But if there's one key takeaway or one thing you want to leave with an action plan today, go ahead and put that in the chat box. So we really hope you took away the understanding of this of self-importance of student-led IEPs and understanding how beneficial it is. We as parents, we help teach these skills. We help give knowledge to our students about how to be self-advocates. So we hope you came up with a greater understanding of those concepts. The educational program for all students should support and promote skills needed to set personal goals, solve, to act, problem solve on barriers of achieving those goals, making appropriate choices based on their personal preferences and interests, participate in the decision making that impacts their lives, learning to advocate for themselves, create an action plan to achieve those goals, and hopefully that it will teach them to self-regulate and self-manage their day-to-day actions. So I'm going to go on to, again, here's a link to the slides for tonight's presentation, the videos, the resources, and all of the great stuff you have. So you will get this in an email in the next couple of days. I'm also going to go ahead and put that document in the slide so you can have it for now. But before we move on to questions and answers, because I really would like you guys to answer questions. So this is what we can do before we move on to questions and answers. We are going to do a quick survey of tonight's presentation. If you are willing to stay, I can do questions for the next 15 or 20 minutes. So how you can do that is you can put it in the chat box, you can put it in the Q&A box, or you can raise your hand and I can unmute you. So either way, if you guys want to stay, but I'm going to launch the poll real quick before people start leaving, because it's really important for us to understand how to best support you guys. It should take about 2 minutes. I usually leave it up for 3 minutes. It should have been launched right now. I'm going to try to be quiet, take the poll, and if you want to start putting questions in there, please go ahead and do that. a couple more seconds, guys, and then we'll move on to some questions if you want to put in there or raise your hands. So, before we move on to questions and answers, here's the way to contact us here at Parents Helping Parents. We're here to answer all your questions, here to support you, here to give you information and resources. So you can always call us. We provide one-on-one direct services to families through phone calls, from Zoom, or in-person appointments. We have lots of training. This is part of our Connections California program, which is specifically for transition to adulthood. So we're really excited about having this program. So if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the question and answer, go ahead and put them in the Q&A, or raise your hand and I'd be happy to answer it. If there's any specific tips that you're looking for, I kind of sprinkled them throughout the training if you didn't notice. I think my biggest takeaway is, first of all, it's never too late to start and it's never too early to start, right? It is wherever you are in the process. So just understanding your child, understanding how do they participate in the family, how do they communicate with the family, are areas of when we're really thinking of putting them in the process of participating in the IEP meeting, taking those into consideration, right? Most of the people at that IEP team are people they're already comfortable with. It's people that they see every single day. They're teachers, they're service providers, they're principals, right? So it's not these strangers sitting at a table. But I know, like during Zoom time, and we there was having when schools weren't in session because of COVID, a lot of the times IEP meetings were always held in through Zoom, right? And it's still an option. But imagine your children being there and listening to all of this and then not being able to participate in that, right? So the first question we always want to ask them of, have you ever thought about what an IEP meeting is and do you want to go? Right? And encourage them and whatever they communicate, maybe their first IEP meeting, they just go in and pop and say hi and, you know, peace out, I'm going to lunch, right? We don't know what they're going to do. They may surprise us, they may want to stay. I think in the earlier years, when we're thinking about having them participate in any kind of process, not even just a student-led IEP meeting, but just participate, is it appropriate for them to be around for all of those when we start talking about the things they're not good at? They already know what they're not good at, so it may not be appropriate for them to say, stay for that portion of the meeting. But the beginning of the meeting, when we really talk about their strengths, because that's usually the first thing we talk about, what is working and their strengths and what it looks like, those, you know, and the introductions and all of those kind of stuff, maybe they can be portion of that. Maybe they're excused for the portions when we're really kind of talking about the area of need. And maybe we bring them back when we're talking about the supports, right? They don't have to stay there the whole time. They can come in and out as appropriate. They could stay for short times. They can stay for long times. They can participate in whatever way they feel comfortable. A really good thing is developing a parent-student agenda. So we may heard of a parent agenda and develop an agenda of what's working, what's not working, kind of things we want to talk about at the IEP meeting, requests we're making at an IEP meeting. An easy way is just start off with a parent-student agenda, right? Ask them what is working and write it down. What's not working and write it down. What kind of support best helps you? And maybe questions that you have. So maybe one question you have and one question they have, right? So why not make it a parent-student agenda and not just a parent agenda or a team agenda? So those are just little ways that we can really get them involved in these processes. So it doesn't look like there's that much questions I have from you guys. I don't, it's hard to um do say anything, but I think this is a pretty easy self-explanatory thing. So my goal to you is, if you work with students with disabilities in any capacity, um, start encouraging and talking to their parents about what does participation look like for your student. And if you're a parent, the first step is just ask them, why do you want to be involved in this process? Because I know, like, when they got to high school and they have speech and language services, they're like, I don't want to go to another speech and language class. I've been doing speech and language forever. I don't want to go to that class, right? And maybe it's not appropriate. Maybe that's not the right services for them anymore. So really understanding their needs and developing the IEP, strengths-based IEPs, by using their strengths to help them achieve their goals, is optimal in any sense. If everybody just focuses on needs and what is going on and forgetting their strengths, they're not going to make progress to any of the things they need to make progress to. So we really want to focus on what a student driven IEP looks like and the meaning of that. Your IEP meetings might not, like I said, be scripted. Might not be this clean, tidy meetings, but they are going to be productive. Research has also really shown that it leads to higher collaboration between everybody. So I really encourage you guys to start that process. So I know I see everybody leaving. I just want to thank you guys again for joining us tonight.